Okay, it's 4:31 Eastern time zone, which is a late time to start a workshop, but I think we've all been waiting for this workshop, so we're excited about it. So we're starting this with both Rachel and myself, just giving you a quick introduction on how it works. So I'm Susanne Hambrusch. I'm at Purdue University, and I've been head twice. I have to tell you, I'm really happy I'm not head today, because it's a really difficult job. So all of you who are heads right now, this is really a hard time. You have bios of everybody on the website for this virtual snowbird. So if you'll be able to enter that, and you see bios of all the speakers and of us, so we won't say more. And Rachel Pottinger is my co-chair, and we've actually looked through all the previous comments and previous instances of this workshop and created a really new format for Snowbird. And now this new format has gone virtual, and it's not quite the same, but hopefully it will work well. So a couple of housekeeping slides. Rachel, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So we have a couple of general housekeeping things. So first of all, please keep yourself muted throughout except for the breakout session. If you need technical assistance, you can contact David Goldstein. These information are in the Google Drive, and we'll also put it in the chat so you can find it. So David is listed under the Zoom name IT support, and we have a handy dandy email address for you as well. The workshop material can be found in the Google Drive, which has all sorts of useful information, and we'll go into what's there in just a second. And if you have a question, type that into the Zoom chat. As much as we love to hear from all of you, and of course the best part about all this is the interaction, it's really hard if everybody tries to vocally give their comments. So please make that in the chat. And we'll manage the chat questions at panelists in a file chat records in the Google Doc. Second housekeeping issue, what is in the Google Doc folder? So there's the agenda, so you can keep track of what's happening when, the chat records file, breakout folder, there's information there, and we'll go into this in a bit more detail in a minute about the breakout room categories. David will help us by doing assignments so that we can have manageable numbers of groups, so you can actually get to the best part of this, which is actually discussing with one another. There are some scenarios which you've also been emailed, and a folder so people can create one file for breakout groups for various notes that they want to share or keep records of. The panelist slides are there, as well as a set of really helpful chair survival rules that's passed down from one new chair's workshop to the next.
Okay, so the breakout session will come back to this, but we formed 6 groups, and you can choose, you choose a group you want to join. It's a small, large department, undergrad focused, you see them here, or you don't care, then you just say, I go anywhere that David needs a human body. We try to have 5 to 6 people in a breakout, so there will be a large number. There will be multiple of type 1, 2, and 3, and so on. And the sooner you actually choose your breakout, the easier it will be for David to do this. If you never renamed yourself, this is how you do it. You click on the text, you click on your image, and you get the option rename. You see your name come up, and you can rename yourself. What we'd like you to do is actually just put the integer of the breakout you want to have in front of your name, and this way David will take them and form the groups. So if you want to be in if you want to be with smallish departments, you put a 1 in front of your name. Okay, and so if you have trouble with this, communicate with David. And so we have these 3 sessions where we have panelists. We have a breakout session. And these first three sessions have slides, which we actually made available to you so you can see them, because they may be a little bit fuzzy on the screen that is shared. And we have a final session 5, which is sort of confession times for the chairs, where they tell you what I wish I had known. And that one, we don't have slides. It's just something around robin talking points. So I think we would like to get the first session going. It's essential nuts and bolts of managing a department. The slides will have the speakers in the order listed here. So that's Ayanna Howard from Georgia Tech, Ann Gates from University of Texas, El Paso, Nancy Amato from Illinois, and Stu Regan from Rutgers University. So he actually is a dean now. He was a chair not long ago. So he's actually in this workshop fulfilling both a head and a dean role. And I'm gonna give David will drive the screen. He has the slides. That means if you're a speaker, you are going to have to say next slide for David to move it on. And I would like for you to take a max of 5 minutes for you to talk about the nuts and bolts that you've experienced that you can recommend or not recommend, and then then there will be time for questions which we collect from the chat room. Okay, so we go. Rachel, is there anything? Rachel's gonna keep time and we'll say if there's anything else you'd want to add, go ahead, and we're gonna try to make sure we have all the panelists lined up.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, so Ayanna, you sent us 2 slides, so you'll be the first one, and your slides are no, actually, sorry. Yes, Ayanna is the first one. Yes, it's in the order. Ayanna and Nancy and 2. Yes.
Okay, so should I begin?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first slide, you can go to the next one. That's just the stats that were asked for. And some of the stats were, so at Georgia Tech School of Interactive Computing, were considered a fairly large department in general. And so some of these pain points and some of these nuts and bolts are affiliated with that. So just a couple of things, just because I have 5 minutes. One is as you become a new chair, you really need to figure out not only the pain points, but also the positives. The reason is because the positives are the things that will keep you engaged, they'll keep you going, but the pain points are the ones that will keep you up at night. And so one of the first things you should do is figure that out. The process of that is, if you're not from the school itself, ask the senior faculty, ask the associate chairs that are there, that are part of your crew, part of your team, to really help you move forward. The other thing is that the budget will be to your detriment if you do not figure it out. So if you don't like budgets and you don't like finance, take a course in it. Really understand the numbers for your department, for your school, because the things that you want to do, both the new things as well as the traditional things, are always linked to your numbers and your budget. So definitely do that. Just kind of going through passion projects. Every chair should have a passion project. You should identify that out of day 1, because what happens is you will have fires, you will deal with those pain points. And traditionally, those things that you really wanted, those dreams you had, will be put aside unless you plan for them at the beginning. And again, the passion projects are the ones that will, again, keep you going, keep you motivated, because those are the things that you will be very, very proud of as you transition through your role. Even though it's the fires that you'll continuously go through, that will keep you up at night. Just last thing is, make sure that you are transparent and open with your faculty, with your staff, with your students. And I would say transparent as much as possible. Sometimes there are things that you can't tell your faculty or your students or your staff, but when you can, even if it's, I can't tell you that right now, but all will be clear in another week or another 2 weeks, definitely keep them informed, because a lot of things and a lot of decisions you may have to make, not everyone may be happy with it, but if you're transparent and honest, at least they will say, well, I understand the decision, even if I don't agree, even if I don't like it. It is one of the hardest jobs. I think it's one of the most rewarding in terms of the learning experience and really growing you as a leader and as a person. and it becomes your new norm quite quickly as you transition and go through these roles. And so those are kind of the nuts and bolts of thinking of what you need to prepare for as you start your role as a chair.
Great, thank you very much. And I believe that sorry, I got distracted for a second. I believe that we're going to do Nancy next, is that correct? Oh, no, Anne. There we go, sorry, Anne. Hopefully Anne will join us in a second.
I'm talking with mute on, so thank you so much. We can go to the next slide. So when I was looking at how, the nuts and bolts, the first two items I really think are kind of giving you this high level view. You really need to establish vision, mission, and goals and be able to map that back to what the college is striving to achieve, as well as the university. And then I think it's really important that you, as a department, you establish some core values and that the faculty owns that. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. When I look at the operational items, the way I look at running a department is using a cooperative team framework. So building positive interdependence. When I look at the very first item on positive interdependence, it's really around establishing and sustaining a culture or climate of inclusion, diversity, and equity. If this is a core value of your institution, so this is looking at broadening participation in computing, right? The second one is also using annual retreats and community assignments as a way of having faculty own what is going on in the department. So the department chair is really kind of leading the department and getting the faculty involved. The next item there is really around practices. So when you look at a cooperative team, it's really about developing the skills that make you effective. So how do you work collaboratively as a department on the quality of the program? Whether that might be observations of other faculty or sharing best practices, especially in this time when we're doing a lot of remote learning. Communication is essential. So how are you going to communicate? Of course, meetings is often used. I'm a big proponent of setting agendas and also posting meeting minutes so that those that could not attend know what was decided upon. You have action items, you have the decisions that are made at the departmental level. And then you have to have accountability, right? So define, this is a collaborative way of looking at accountability. And so that is dealing with performance evaluation. We bring together faculty, we have well-defined rubrics that guide it. It's not the be all end all, but also how do you define workload and how you look at the assignment of courses or release time. And then of course you need to celebrate your successes. Rewards and recognition are really important to keep everyone moving. We talked about, Ayana talked about budget. You also have to think about assigning and preparing advisors if that's a model that you use in your department. On the next slide, the perspective I give is like looking at faculty as a whole. How do you hire faculty? How do you bring people into the department that share your core values? I think this is really important for you to maintain a cohesive department. You have to be looking at advancement, moving your assistants to associates, your associates to full. And then how do you value faculty development? Because that's really important from many perspectives, whether it's around proposal writing and going after center or large institute type proposals, or even if it's just around pedagogy. Student success is critical. So be thinking about not just how teaching is done within the classroom, but your engagement outside the classroom. And then what techniques are you using at this time when we're remote to engage students? You also want to promote student development activities. And then last, it's around engaging the community. I think it's really important that industry be involved, whether it's through advisory roles, but also giving you feedback on your program or new programs, and how do we engage industry and with students. And then last, of course, it's around working with the community, building relationships, working with K through 12 teachers or students. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Anne. And then next we have Nancy Amato. Oh, Nancy, we can't hear you. You'll have to unmute. Try again.
Can you
No.
hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, I have two things that I had to unmute them both, sorry. So first off, I apologize. I missed the memo that I was actually supposed to make a slide with my number, so I'll tell them to you. But I'm Nancy Amato from the University of Illinois, and I've been a department head here for about 1.5 years. And before that, I was at Texas A&M for 24 years, which I did spend 1 year as interim department head. So I'm not all that experienced, but I have had to do this twice in 2 different institutions. So at Illinois, we have about 100 faculty in the department, about 80 are tenure track, about 20 teaching professors, and a growing, we're starting to grow our research professor ranks. So we have right now only 3 or 4, but we're adding a few more. We have about 2,000 undergrads in 14 different majors. There's a CS major, and then there are 13 different, let's call them blended majors that are computer science with other departments that are scattered throughout the whole campus. Statistics, mathematics, but also things like music, linguistics, crop sciences, etc. We have about 1,800 graduate students. There are about 400 PhD students, roughly 200 masters, research master's students, and about 1,200 professional master students. So, okay, on to the nuts and bolts. So I thought I would share with you a couple things that I found really valuable. The very first thing is, don't assume you know what people think and feel. So at Texas A&M, I was interim department head after being there for about 20 years. I had actually participated in the recruitment of almost all the faculty there. I knew all the staff. I'd been there a long time. And what I got some advice from one of our executive associate dean when I took on the interim role. He said, talk with everyone in the department and see how they feel. And I did. It was a I learned a lot of things that I really didn't know. And, I am someone that people, I feel like people talk with me. So that was a really valuable experience. And when I came to Illinois, when I was new, that was even more important because I didn't know everyone. And I really learned a lot, and it helped me understand the issues that people had and also the ways that people would be potentially interested in contributing. And if you don't give them a chance to tell you that, they won't, right? So I had those one-on-one meetings. And then the other thing I would say is throughout your tenure, try to put in place a variety of different mechanisms to get input, because some people want to stop by your office or stop by your Zoom room now. Other people want to send you an email, like when they're upset, they send you an email. Other people want to fill out an anonymous survey. You just want to provide as many different ways so that everyone feels like they have some channel to talk with you and let you know what they're thinking. I've been having office hours, so every Friday afternoon I have 1 or 2 hours that I'm available, and they're open to everyone, faculty, students, and staff. And I would say, practically every week I get someone from each of those groups stopping in, even now. And the other thing is, don't forget about the staff. They have a lot of insights that you won't get from faculty and students. And it's also important to maybe, if for example, you have a lot of turnover in the staff in your department, you might want to try to talk to some of the staff who've recently left. They could give you some insights into things that current staff might not feel that comfortable sharing with you. The other thing I'd say is you want to really be careful and build your team carefully and strategically. You can't do it all on your own. Even if your department is really small, You really can't do it on your own. And even if you could, you shouldn't, right? You're there to be the leader to bring everyone together. So the thing that, there will be people that are have been involved in running the department for a long time. They know a lot. They come to you and volunteer. Think about also expanding that circle and try to provide an opportunity for others to contribute as well. That's one thing I found useful in these one-on-one meetings I had with everyone, to talk with them, to ask them, what do they think about the department? What do they think was going well? What wasn't? And also ask them what they'd like to do. You might be surprised that some people that other people are just like shocked by, would want to step up and do something. The other thing is, when you're selecting your leadership team, don't just pick your friends. Think about all the different dimensions in the department and try to include people so that you cover as many of them as possible. That way you'll, just like, we all know that diversity is important. Well, it's also important to have diversity in your leadership team. One last thing is, the staff at the university, not just in your department, in all different areas of the university, will be really valuable resources to you. The HR staff, the general counsel. Unfortunately, I know the general counsel. I got to know the general counsel on my first day on the job. Not a good thing usually. But they've been really useful resources to me throughout and have helped me do things. And on many times, I've had to just frankly ask for emergency assistance in like really short time. And we have done it, more than once. And so that was really because I had a good relationship, and I always treated the staff respectfully, and also acknowledge their work when they help you. So
Nancy, Nancy, I have to give you 10 seconds.
Yeah,
I'm done. I'm just going to read the last bullet.
Okay,
So
read the last bullet.
Say, don't rush. You come in and you want to do stuff. You have to take time to build the support, but don't go too slow either.
Okay, thank you. And to the last one. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tu Nguyen, and I'm currently Division Dean of Mathematical and Physical Sciences, which is a part of the School of Arts and Sciences at Rutgers University. There are lots of information there, but it's available for you to view, so we don't have to cover in detail. Let's go to the next slide. My division has 6 departments, probably is the key point, with computer science being one of them. I was associate chair for 5 years, and then chair for 2 years, and then I've stepped into my current position for this first year I just finished up. Next slide, please, Dave. So I think that some of the points would necessarily echo what the other panelists have said, so I'll try to keep it brief on those. But I think one of the really important points when you step into the chair's position is to think about a vision for what you want to achieve during your very short term. Okay, sometime when you're working through your 3 years or whatever it is, it will seem to stretch forever, but in actuality, it's very short and it'll go very quickly. And you've already heard from the other panelists that you will be hit with an avalanche of fires to fight and things to be doing every day, right? And those are your primary responsibilities. So you do have to take care of it, but you also have to figure out, what is that you want to achieve during your time as chair, and save some time for it. And in particular, I think one point that I didn't write down here, but it's really important to keep in mind, is you've got to train your faculty and your staff to remove some of the fires, right? I found myself a lot saying, I will do this at the last minute this one time, but if you do it again next time, I won't handle it, right? And so you have to train your faculty to be bringing stuff up earlier so that you aren't constantly fighting fire. And then take some time to develop your vision. If you have a vision day one when you step into the job, great. Otherwise, take some time, but make sure that you define a vision so that you can work towards it and have a retrospective on what you've achieved once you're done. And then echoing the other panelists, I think that it's very important to assemble a strong team. Clearly, you want a strong executive team, but that tends to only have a few people. And so you also have to augment this with other members of your departments that are willing to take the lead in certain areas, right? And then key of all is once you assemble a strong team, make sure to delegate, right? Often we will think that we can do the best job with any particular task, but you won't be able to handle everything. And so it's really important to delegate and then allow other people to bring in all their energy and engagement, et cetera. And then after that, make sure to learn the academic cycle, right, to understand your time commitments throughout the different times of the year. There's a rhythm and a rhyme to the academic year, right? Usually you'll start with promotion, which takes an enormous amount of time. And then you'll switch over to planning for spring. And then you have to think about hiring. And then maybe it's promotion again for teaching faculty members and reappointments if you have those. And then it's finishing up hiring, and then it's planning for the next year, right? And so it's a constant cycle where you sort of want to figure out which pieces you might hand off, which pieces you're going to lead, and how much time they're going to take. And so get to know that cycle really well. Echoing again, get to know your administrators and IT staff. Really important. Can't stress that enough, because all of a sudden it really expands our horizon, and we have to be talking to people and viewing from a different point of view. And then, of course, get to know the administrative staff in your dean's office. And I was going to actually end with a bullet that says, get to know your dean, but I figure, put that in the next session where from the dean's perspective, right?
Okay, that was your last slide too?
Yes. I'm done.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to ask some of the questions that came up on the chat that people have asked, and so I group them together a little bit. One of the questions that came up in more than one comment was promotion to tenure is many times regulated by the university. There is a question of if somebody wants to come up for early tenure, but more important is when is the right time to promote a full professor? How do you if somebody wants to get promoted, if you want to encourage somebody to consider it, what's the right process that doesn't leave any hurt feelings behind and actually you can recommend as something that works well? So I think this is a good nuts and bolts question, and anybody who wants to answer it.
I can start, I guess.
Yes.
I don't really understand, at least in the institutions I've been at, it's not a problem for the chair or head to talk about promotion timelines with faculty members. That's part of their job. In fact, it's expected that we would talk about it at the annual review time and help them understand when it might be the right time for them. Nobody has a perfect, case. Nobody's perfect on all dimensions. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and so each person needs to kind of make that decision on their own. But it's the head's responsibility to help them understand their case and to help them understand areas where they might work, could improve their case. And that should be happening annually through the annual review process.
Yeah, and at UTEP, we have a third-year review for tenure track faculty, and that's where they're provided feedback on whether they're on track or not. And I think that it's really important that you understand the guidelines at the college level, departmental and college level, and then at the institutional level. Because as a chair, you're really, I see your job as my job as really helping the tenure track faculty become successful with respect to research and with respect to teaching. We do reduce workloads so that they have the opportunity to develop their research portfolio. With respect to going from associate to full, I agree that is with Nancy, that this is really part of the annual review process. But I also think that you really have to pay attention as to how long they have stayed as associate professor. looking at maybe 5 to 6 years out, but then there's another level of expectations. It's really important that faculty are aware of that. And I think it's important to really encourage faculty to go up for full.
Does Ayana or Tu want to add to that? Any?
So let me quickly add, just for a second.
No, I think it's just having the conversation.
Oops, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ayana.
No, I was just saying, I wanted to reiterate that it is about the conversation, and letting them know the positives, as well as these are the things that you need to work on.
Okay, thank you. Tu?
This is where engaging your dean could be useful as well, right? Clearly, there's a lot of institutional knowledge inside your department, and for chairs who may not. So for example, I stepped in the chair role almost immediately after I became a full professor. So I had very little experience with promotions to full professor, right? So there's institutional knowledge within the department, talking with some of the senior faculty member on what criteria, right? And whether the person seems to be meeting it. And also talking to your dean is useful here. Because ultimately the package has to go through the dean's office, right? And the dean should have a reasonable amount of experience as to what institutionally will work for promotions.
Okay, thank you. So let me go on to another question, which was a set of questions, but they all touch on something that is really very difficult for a head, and it's comforting to know that every department deals with it. It's phrased very carefully, saying, well, what exists there for faculty development for senior faculty? How can what exists there on teaching innovations that faculty can pursue, research innovations that faculty can pursue? And you're talking about more senior people from the messages as I interpret it, which really addresses the issue, what do I do with faculty as they become comfortable and maybe don't really don't really do what the department expects. So they've gotten promoted, they may be a full professor. What recommendations are there to keep them engaged, to keep them productive, to keep them innovative, to pursue their development? I can tell you every department asks itself this question. So a couple of magic answers from the panelists.
So perhaps I can start. There are some faculty I can think of who I tried and essentially gave up, so you won't always succeed. On the other hand, I think following up on one of the comments made earlier about listening, I think this is where it can be very applicable, right? There were a couple of faculty members who were true challenges when I took on the chair, but through some discussions at first, reluctantly, admittedly, but going on, right? Finding areas that they were passionate about, but that the department wasn't leveraging. And if you can find those, there are times when, some of your senior faculty will just turn around and really all of a sudden become really reinvested in the department. If that's the question, meaning that the more disengaged senior, right? Professional development overall is different.
Yep.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So it's really a hard question because as was just mentioned, every faculty is different, but I think it's really important that you have those conversations of where they want to be and what they want to do. And then, really acknowledging what they're really good at and identifying those projects that they can contribute to. I've been fairly successful with that approach in the department. I think the other thing that's really important that's often overlooked is to make sure that you recognize faculty for what they do. There has to be a way to reward them. It's not always around monetary. It may be about highlighting their work on the website. But I think that letting faculty know that you appreciate what they're doing, recognize them in some way, and be able to distribute that across the whole department is super important in this area.
Ayana, did you want to say something?
Yeah, it really is finding their passion points. Just so you know, and we've done stats, at least at Tech, about 25% of your faculty will be, they'll show up for class. Let's just say that. And so how do you get them to do more? I truly believe that faculty want to do more. And so if you find something, it may not be research and education, it might be service, it might be that pet project that they always wanted to work on, and trying to enable that. What I find is that the faculty you've defined as non-productive rise to the challenge. It might be mentorship. It might be that, you know, they wanted to do outreach. It might be that they wanted to do something with undergrads. Now you might not need it in your department, but it's okay because it reinvigorates them so that they are now happy again or productive again.
Okay, thank you. Anybody wants to add to this question?
No, I totally agree with everything that's been said so far.
Okay. So there was one, Ken, I would assume with D&I, you mean diversity and inclusion? There was Ken Anderson,
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. So, because that's a really, really important question, is there are lots of diversity and inclusion, there are broadening participation at NSF that has, and yet the simple question is then how do you actually manage it well in your department when you have, you know, just everybody there? They didn't choose to go to a broadening participant workshop, but they're still there, and how do you actually make it work? I think that is an important question, and we have three female faculty on that panel who have been involved in broadening participation for a really, really long time. So, and two, so let's just, I'd really like to get your answer and advice on that question.
Well, I can start. If I understand the question right, and I think that UTEP is very different because we're an HSI, we're a Hispanic Serving Institution, but we were funded through the RED, Revolutionizing Engineering Education and Computing Education. And so the big focus was really on climate inclusion. And at the beginning, there were a couple of faculty who were really resistant to this idea that why do we have to increase the number of females and why do we have to, you know, Latinas? So, but one of the things that we did that I thought was really impactful is that we had a climate survey and it had a lot of points around inclusion, belonging, identity, and so forth. And so we shared that with the faculty. We had a discussion. It wasn't telling them, it was giving them the data, different parts of the data, having them discuss it. Faculty that were resistant were kind of shocked when they found out that some students responded that they didn't feel like they were valued in the classroom, that their answers were valued. And that kind of turned things around. It started to make them think, wow, I mean, they may be talking about my class. And so there was a lot of reflection. I think reflection is really important. Hearing the student voices is really important. And for me, that was kind of a turning point within our department.
Thanks, Anne. One of the other pen? Yes, Nancy?
So frankly, this is the reason I wanted to be department head, was to be able to do something about that. Very few people, you know, start off with their PhD and go and become faculty because they want to be department head. But I think that we have an opportunity to actually make big changes and improvements with this as the department head. That was true from the beginning. When I was interviewing for the job, I told them that was like one of the big things I wanted to do, and we were working towards having programs for that. I have not found resistance among the faculty. You know, there's probably different levels of engagement by the faculty, but like when we host, but there we're making many different ways for faculty to contribute and participate, and also providing support. So we hired a full-time staff member whose focus is really on broadening participation in computing, and she's helping us with all these things. I added a question for everyone to report on their activities in broadening participation in computing in the annual review form. So basically, I tried to make the annual reporting really simple and basically just asked them, tell me your highlights in these areas, teaching, research, and we added broadening participation there, and what they want to do in the next year. So I think just really making it be an identified priority for the department and explaining to them why it's important. I think now everyone, if people don't understand now why it's important, you know, they're really got their head in the sand. I think most people are really interested in this now, and they would like to talk about it, but it's one of the things that maybe they're not comfortable with. They don't have the knowledge, and so I think sharing the statistics and things like Anne was mentioning, how students feel, bringing that out and talking about it openly with everyone, and making them feel comfortable. You know, they shouldn't be embarrassed to talk about it, or if they don't understand maybe why someone could feel not welcome, you know, let them ask that question so you can talk with them and try to explain it to them.
Okay. So I think for I don't want to cut off. I think this this is an important question, which probably will come up in other of the sessions again. And I think there are also some in the you can read in the scenarios. There are some of them touch on it. I think we do want to go on to the next panel. I want to table one comment which came in, which is really important for all of you who are thinking about being head or just started being head, and that is mentoring assistant professors, especially in times like this, where the two groups in the survey that CRA did on heads that feel really the stress more than anybody else in your department is, well, it's actually three groups. It's the head, it's the teaching faculty, and the assistant professors. And so these three groups are things you really need to pay attention to. But I think we want to, we can have this a question in the later section because it's so core to everything you do. I want to thank the panelists for on the first session. And I do want to go on to the deans. And we have a set of 4 terrific deans that okay, I'm gonna introduce them and Rachel is gonna watch the chat. Yes, so David, can you move the slides up? I think the first one, which is the, okay, so the first one is Alex Wolf. So he's and so they are in the order. Let me just take a look. I think
yeah, we're good.
You're good. Okay, so go ahead. About 5 minutes for each. You've been. I thank the first panelists for keeping the time. That made my job easy. And let's get started on the first panelist. Alex, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Rachel, for organizing this event. If my deanly colleagues will indulge me, just to give you a little scoping for what this session is about. Obviously, we're trying to give a perspective from the dean, who some people might call your boss, but of course we know that's not really true. The 4 of us come from very different sorts of situations and institutions, and it's important to kind of recognize that your situation could be quite different, and that you have to, you know, situate it in your particular environment. So we'll try to give you some general sorts of thoughts from our particular perspectives, but they are particular perspectives. So if you want to go to the slides.
So
I'm not seeing them up there.
They're there.
Oh, they're there. They're your second slide is your college by the numbers.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Yes.
I had to switch on screen share. Okay, so these are the numbers. We don't need to go through them. I just want to point out that this particular situation is a school that is an engineering school, but it is a rather non-traditional engineering school with a non-traditional set of departments. Probably about a quarter to a third of the faculty are what you would consider computer science and in the domain of CRA. So it's heavily influenced by computing, and of course, in terms of student numbers, heavily dominated by computing students. Okay, we can go on.
Next slide. Yeah.
Next slide. So first of all, you might not realize what a dean actually does. And it's important to understand where the dean is coming from when you are interacting with them as a chair. So you were a faculty member, you may not have met the dean ever. If you did meet the dean, you probably did that under very, very rare circumstances. But what does a dean actually do? Well, certainly the dean is responsible for basically every aspect of the division or school, academic, financial, the facilities, which can be quite complicated for someone in engineering. There's usually a sizable staff associated with the deanery. We happen to run a very centralized staffing structure. So there's probably about 65 staff that I lead just as an administrator. Clearly things percolate up to the level of the dean, and there's always the issue of trade-offs, disputes, complaints, and making those decisions are, of course, part of the job of a dean and why deans get paid more than department chairs. The role of the central administration, of course, is really key, and the advocacy that the dean does on behalf of the unit is incredibly important work. So there's a lot of time spent trying to influence the central administration to understand the particular needs of the unit. And then, of course, you're in a context with other academic units, somewhat in competition, somewhat in cooperation, and that balance is one that the dean needs to find. Other institutions, the general public. Of course, fundraising is significant, and I don't mean just funds, extramural funds or philanthropic funds, but even funds within the university. And without those funds, of course, we don't get anywhere. And of course, the dean is a faculty member too, but usually gets very little chance to exercise that. Next slide. So I just wanted to capture a little bit about expectations, let's put it that way. And you can read these for yourself, but let me just in the short amount of time that I have, what really gets a dean unhappy? What makes a dean unhappy? And that's where there's bad intersection or bad communication, bad alignment of values and mission and vision with the department chair. And so understanding where that is, where the dean is coming from, I think is very important. It's also important for the dean to understand where the department is coming from. And you need to help the dean with that understanding. So problems that surface too soon, the dean expects you to solve your own problems to the extent that you can. Problems that come up too late means that it's hard to solve those problems. So, and then that often comes with complaints that don't have solutions. So rather than being just complaining, it's always best to give options, to say, if we go this way, or that way, here's a set of choices, what do you think? Being worked around is an interesting one too, because you will get answers that are not the ones you want. And if your reaction is, well, okay, if the dean didn't say yes, let's go ask the provost, that's not gonna make the dean happy, okay? You need to be working together. So what thrills a dean? A creative chair, a positive chair. It's really hard to be positive in some of the situations we find ourselves in. Decisiveness, clear vision, that you can develop with your department, but expressing that clear vision, understanding how to express that, partnering with other departments around the university, that gets the dean really, really happy. And responsiveness. So when the dean asks you for something, it's usually important. Please be responsive. So in that context, what's the role of the chair? Obviously, you need to advocate for your department. You need to represent the viewpoints fairly of the department. You're not representing just yourself, you're representing the department. If there's disagreement within the department, you need to share that. You need to build that relationship with the dean. You need to work on that. There are some chairs that I have breakfast with regularly. There are some that I don't. I have better relationships with the ones who are reaching out to me. Build partnerships with other chairs. And maybe most important, you've just become a chair, make sure that you have the next chair in place, or even the next 2 or 3 chairs in place. Work with your department to build that succession plan and start now when you just started. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alex. After you, can you do the next slide? Yeah, 2.
Hi, and I'm Tu Nguyen from Rutgers. So we already covered the division a little bit, so we can skip this. Again, magically, the number 6 come up somehow of departments. But we can go to the next slide. All right, so I'm gonna zero in on sort of one aspect of what Alex just covered. And in particular, when someone steps in the chair role, right, there's different balances between what I call managing in, which is sort of operationally within your department, and managing out, that is relationship with other departments and you know, university administration, et cetera, right? Part of what Alex just talked about. As a CS chair in the current environment, right, you must expect to spend a significant amount of your effort in managing out in collaboration with your dean. And in particular, it's an exciting time for computer science. We all know this, right? And it's great. We're getting resources, we're getting hiring, or we were getting hiring, and maybe we will again soon, et cetera, right? But that's partly because computing is sort of spreading out, right? We're interfacing with many other sciences, engineering, for example, in quantum computing, right? We now have to talk to the folks from physics, chemistry, math, engineering, data science. I'm sure you already know. You know, you have to share with statistics, math, information science, right? AI, ML, you have to share with statistics, engineering, and those are only the disciplines that sort of actually share things with computer science, right? There are all the other disciplines where computing is penetrating as techniques that are really important to research, right? So what this means is that there are all kind of interdisciplinary stuff going on, right? There's research. How do you work with other departments for efforts like digital humanities, digital smart agriculture, et cetera? Recently, I got pulled into a meeting where, you know, the research folks were talking about how to apply computing in agriculture, and I had to learn all the stuff about, you know, agriculture, right? This is happening in education, and in particular, one of the challenges at both the undergraduate and the graduate level is how do you appropriately train non-computer scientists to properly apply computing without forcing them to get a degree, right? Same thing is applying to industry alumni engagement, you know, where you have to be collaborating with other departments. So ready for the next slide? So what does that mean? Echoing a theme from the last session again, you have to assemble a strong team to help you manage in. That's critical because a lot of your time is gonna be spent on managing out, right? You yourself, I believe as chair, has to lead the effort in working outward. You have to assemble a set of key leaders to help you with your effort. You won't be able to do it yourself, even though it's important for you to lead. You have to define strategic priorities for your department because everybody wants computer science to partner with them in some way or other, and you can't do everything. And then here comes, you know, I think what is the key, right? And this echoes a little bit of, again, what Alex said. You have to find the appropriate balance between competing with other units and cooperation. We all want resources to be coming to computer science because it's exciting, right? On the other hand, other department has to be getting something too, or else they won't be very happy to work with computer science, right? And so as trite as it sounds, win-win collaborations is really important. And nothing is more upsetting to a dean than a chair that constantly only wants to gather resources into his or her department, right? Because deans have to balance, okay? And then finally, I think just to stress that, be a dependable resource for your dean, meaning not that you're at the beck and call, but what I mean is I have to rely on my chairs to have properly thought about competition versus cooperation. That if the chair is asking for something, I can depend on the fact that the chair have really thought about how it fits into the mission of the school, right? And not, again, constantly pulling resources only into computer science. So with that, I'm done.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And next is that Carla, right? Yes.
Hi, I'm Carla Broadley. I'm Dean of Corey College of Computer Sciences. So I'm in a slightly different situation in that I don't have departments inside of Corey that are designated by research areas like CMU and Georgia Tech does, but I do have departments in the fact that we have campuses in many locations. So our main campus is in Boston, but we also offer several computer science programs at multiple campuses across North America and in London, and our latest campus in Portland, Maine. So I have a department chair in each of those locations where we have a student. So I've got 4 other department chairs in addition to a senior associate dean who's my Boston department chair. And we have a lot of different degree programs, and one of the things that makes life interesting, exciting, and challenging is that some of our degrees are joint with other colleges in the university. And we have over 36 combined majors where we have, you know, computer science and design, computer science and English, data science and health sciences. And so managing those is also part of the work of the associate deans for whatever level it's at. So it's a complex thing. Next slide, please. I decided to do my how I spend my time as well, and as my person who does my slides noted that I had not been able to add properly to reach 100%, and I said that was on purpose. I do spend quite a lot of time fundraising and business development with industry. I'd say the hardest part of my job is managing laterally, making sure that you know, I'm working really well with all of the other deans. And then of course there's managing up. There's just the day-to-day business of the college, but I have a lot of really great people who help with that. My least favorite is dealing with sort of yucky people problems. And I definitely have that. I do a lot of hiring, and I'll just say one of the things that really irks me in hiring, going back to Alex, is when a department chair or the head of the search committee helps the person I'm hiring negotiate against me. And that is really, really irksome because I'm trying to land the person, I'm trying to give them the best package I can, and they have their advisor and all of their friends to help them negotiate. So you can provide excuse me, guidance, but don't negotiate. Help them negotiate. Spend some time on strategy. And then most recently, I took on an extra full-time job, which is as the, excuse me, executive director for the Center for Inclusive Computing, which is a center funded by Melinda Gates where we give out money for people to help create a more inclusive environment. Next slide, please. So where is the computer science department and why does it matter? It's either its own college, it's inside of engineering, it's inside of arts and sciences, or maybe it's just inside sciences or some subset of sciences. And why does it matter? It matters because we'll see in the next talk by Eugene that it also depends on how the university funding model works. But when you want to do things like combined majors or CS plus X, it's very relevant where you are. So an example would be if you're inside engineering and you have core requirements in engineering, you may not have the flexibility to be able to do computer science and English. And I'm seeing that in my work with the Center for Inclusive Computing, where we've gone on site visits now of you know, close to 15, 16 schools, and how open they are to thinking about CS plus X when I meet with the dean really depends who the dean is and what they're dean of. If they're dean of arts and sciences, they think it's a grand idea. Sometimes if they're dean of engineering, they feel like the dean of arts may not be, or the dean of humanities may not be open to this idea of doing CS plus X or combined majors, particularly if the revenue model is such that it follows enrollments. And budget always follows enrollments. It just depends on whether there's a lag time or not. Sorry, Eugene, not trying to steal what you're saying. But it matters in terms of the flexibility of what you're going to be able to do. It also matters in terms of being able to collaborate. So we have a separate College of Engineering at Northeastern, and we have a very deep collaboration at this point with ECE, both for hiring joint faculty and also having joint programs. And that's actually easier if we were inside the same college. So it's more difficult because we're not, because of how the financial ramifications of tuition dollars follow. So thinking about what you're able to do and how collaborative you're able to be in your university, you're really going to need your dean for those collaborations. If you want to create you know, combined degrees, it requires 2 deans to sign off on it, depending on where the collaboration is going to happen. And so it's quite relevant where the CS department is, both for what curriculum you have to do and for your ability to collaborate across the university. All right,
thank you.
Last.
Yeah, so thank you, Carla. So that's Eugene, the 4th dean, and a Canadian dean. We thought that was important to have a good representation. So go ahead, Eugene.
All right, hope you can hear me. Yep, the token Canadian is on board. So I'm at Simon Fraser University, and prior to that, I was at the University of Toronto for many years. So I have I have an example of 2 kinds of budget models. Applied Sciences is a medium-sized faculty. About half of those, about half of the positions, I didn't mention 120 faculty lines, about 60 of those are in computer science, and about 2/3 of the enrollment is in computer science, with the other 3 engineering schools. It operates on a responsibility-centered budget model. University of Toronto, by and large, operates on an incremental model. So let's go and talk about that in the next slide. If there's one important punchline for departments, it's that budget does not equal faculty lines. There is an awful lot more to the way you'll be running your budgets than how many faculty lines you can squeeze out of the budget. And there's no way I can do justice to the complexity of budget overall. I can give you a taste for it. I'm happy to entertain kind of email requests and, you know, some kind of follow-up on Zoom if you'd like. An incremental model is one that a lot of big universities use. And the idea basically is to project your revenue, project your expenses. That gives you the increment from year T-1 to T. And then that differential or that increment is allocated to faculties on the basis of some kind of distribution model. And that can be subject to a variety of things. It may be a data intensive model, it might be politics, it might be history, tradition, that kind of thing. That delta is always oversubscribed, and it has its virtues, but my biggest problem with it is that it's subject to the least busy dean winning. So basically those who have the most time to advocate typically end up doing better. And that is problematic when you have small faculties and small departments and large faculties and large departments. Large faculty deans and large department chairs typically are very, very busy and don't have that same opportunity. So there's a kind of inequity that can be built into an incremental model. We can discuss that further. That has to be very carefully modulated. The flip side is I guess one might call a business-oriented model, the responsibility-centered model, where faculty revenue is a function of some abstraction of enrollment. Often on a moving average, the enrollment often takes into account the equivalent of a virtual student, so they can take into account students who take courses in other faculties or other departments. So there's usually a complex mechanism that recognizes what a unit what a student unit is, and it isn't necessarily headcount. That's something to be aware of. In public universities and most private universities, the greatest revenue driver is undergraduate enrollment, whatever abstraction you use. And that's something really that does need to be taken into account from a responsibility-centered approach. We're going through a process right now at Simon Fraser where the cost of space will also be included in responsibility-centered management, which is going to be quite interesting. So in principle, it's an objective model, but it requires a lot of hard modeling. And the inequities can arise when the cost of a student in different units is not appropriately recognized. It's very easy at the top level in kind of general university revenue to basically indicate that a student is a student is a student, and that's really the model that flows. The advocacy in the engineering sciences and in computer science is to ensure that we recognize not just those areas, things like contemporary art, areas that have studios and labs and so on. The cost of education is higher, as is the cost of infrastructure in general. So that's money that flows into the faculty. The faculty itself might have a different distribution model. It may use an incremental model for the departments. There's some merit in that because often there's a wide range of size and mission within the academic units in a faculty. Next slide. So the key issue is that your academic mission is something that has to factor in the financial model. Hopefully you can get out ahead of it when you do your academic planning, but ultimately you're constrained operationally by that financial model. Right now, that financial model is turbulent, to say the least. It's not clear where things are going to be for the next 2 or 3 years, but it is something that hopefully will level out, and enrollments so far have been pretty strong in the engineering sciences and computer science. So it's important from a chair's perspective to understand how the higher level model works. In other words, how does the faculty acquire revenue? And then to understand how the faculty distributes revenue to a department or academic unit. And an issue of particular importance to me is how do we fund niche, selective, low enrollment programs, programs that might attract underrepresented groups but still be low in enrollment. Those sorts of things are tricky to do in an RCM. So certainly at the decanal level, we really like proposals that are ambitious, push boundaries, hopefully generate revenue, and in the Goldilocks way, kind of just covers all and covers other important activities as well. An example of that would be revenue generating applied research master's programs or certificate programs that in which a high quality of education can be focused on those students, but there may be some margin there that you can apply to other areas. And certainly it's okay, in fact, it's actually good to stop doing some things, but don't use budget as the only reason. It should be part of your academic planning model. So that is budget in 3 or 4 minutes. Thanks.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Rachel's you're gonna do.
I'm ready. So thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate the time and the great points. And there have been 2 sort of threads of discussion, and I wanted to start with the question about how much oversight do deans expect to have into internal department affairs, particularly on faculty workloads, for example, committee memberships or teaching assignments?
My mic happens to be on, so I'll answer that. Some of this depends on whether you're in a unionized or non-unionized environment. And that actually has certain implications regarding workload assignment. Generally speaking, workload is assigned, is really, the role of the dean is really to ensure there's equitable workload policies across the units. Then it's certainly up to the department chairs to use their best practices to assign workload. In my faculty, at Simon Fraser, deans are ultimately responsible for workload. So there has to be a transmission of workload up to the dean for investigation, but I delegate all the reasonable aspects of workload assignment.
I think you can add that in certain situations, there's a resource need, particularly for computer science, where we're seeing such large enrollments. Departments are strapped and have difficulty putting teachers in front of students. And there's usually a resource request associated with it. If the workload policy of the department doesn't look like it's actually spending time helping out with that issue, then there's a problem. And if it seems like the faculty are really putting in the time to teach, then it's a lot easier to justify that extra resource request that comes up to the dean.
Great. And just gonna wait a second to see if anyone else wants to chime in.
So if I may add one thing, Rachel. So You know, I echo what Alex and Eugene said. The one addition there is with respect to owning the curriculum, right? There are departments that I have trouble with where they try to hide the fact that faculty don't teach very large classes, and they hire PTLs to teach all the large classes, okay? That's not a problem with computer science, ever. The problem more with computer science, I find, is that the faculty likes to teach the graduate classes or the advanced and refuses to own the curriculum all the way down, right? And so often the teaching instructors or PTLs teach the beginning courses, and then there's a disconnect to the rest of the curriculum, okay? And that's something that really bothers me, because that's where we lose diversity. That's where we lose our students that could be doing well, et cetera, right? And that's the one thing that I'd like to stress in the department, that it's really important for the faculty, however the workload assignment is done, to really own the curriculum from the beginning to the end, and the entire faculty, not just the teaching faculty, right?
Great, thank you. So the next question has to deal with the responsibility of interfacing across units. And I think that the one example of this is for people who have CS+X programs. So the general first question was, what is the responsibility to work with the dean in interfacing across units? How much coordination and at what points in the process? And there may be, again, different examples, CS+X or something else.
I'll take that one. If it's within the college, then, you know, I think the dean should know and be excited about it, and maybe even want to, you know, contribute resources to the endeavor. If it's across different colleges, your dean better know, you know, that, I mean, you know, at this point at Northeastern, because we have 36 of these, the undergraduate dean has full license to go out and do whatever they want, because all of the deans are now collaborative about this, because we also worked out the funding model where we know exactly where that stands. And it took a while for me to show that by having this collaboration at Northeastern with, for example, humanities, that enrollments in humanities went up, applications went up. And it also really helped with the diversity of our undergraduates as well. But unless you have an established protocol for how to do it, if you're talking to a department that's underneath another dean, your dean better know. That would be a really grouchy occurrence to find out.
It's true. You know, the thing is that on campuses, leadership have this interdisciplinarity mentality that, you know, this is really the thing that administrators think that they can do at an institution. And when they become a provost or they become a chancellor, wow, you know, we can get people working across these different units. So, you know, from that point of view, a dean gets some good press with the people that they have to interact with at the higher levels by seeing this kind of interaction. So personally, I would encourage this kind of thing, and I would look to department chairs to come to me and say, hey, you know, I've got this idea with these two chair, you know, this other chair in humanities. We're working on this thing. What do you think? So I like that initiative, and it helps me in negotiating with my provost and chancellor.
And it's also very well documented across many different institutions that it really helps with encouraging women in computer science. It's not clear that it helps with other underrepresented groups. And I'll just give one statistic, and we're collecting a lot of this data through the center, but at Northeastern, close to 40% of our combined majors are women versus you know, a number of around 31-32% overall. So obviously our non-combines are less than 40% women.
So I'd like to just add a little, in the sense that I like to encourage, you know, the chairs to talk with lots of their colleagues, right? Have lots of distributed conversations. Don't need to sort of pull the dean in on everything. But as things develop where you're gonna need some financial or institutional support, right? Say you're talking about forming a center, okay? Or you're talking about a program that's gonna have revenue flow. And Carla brought up a great point where, so for example, the way that Rutgers work, okay, the enrolling school gets a certain number of dollars regardless of where that student take the classes, okay? So the school that offered classes to students that aren't enrolled in that school loses out on dollars, okay? So when it affects the revenue flow, those are the two things where things start to build. There you need to get your dean involved, right? And so that there aren't surprises in terms of revenue flow, or you don't come to your dean and says, everything is set up now, you just have to give me $1 million, okay? That tends to not work, right? And so have lots of conversation, but as it builds towards institutional support, then make sure to coordinate with your dean.
But don't worry about whether the revenue flow adversely affects your dean. Your dean still wants to do collaborative things, because one of the things about being a dean is that you realize that you actually care about the whole university and not just your own little unit. Otherwise, you're not a very good dean and you don't last very long.
Yeah, Carla's exactly right. I mentioned to my department heads that outreach is really important, especially in computer science, where we, until the last, say, 7 or 8 years, we've kind of had our heads in the ground. So it's really important to, and we've seen the outcome of that in industry and the way things have played out. So outreach within the university, I think, is wonderful. The money is important. We'll have to follow that, but there is an academic mission there, and the ways in which computer science can propagate throughout the university in an intellectually credible way, I think, is really important, and we need to explore all possibilities.
Great, thank you. One more quick question to ask, perhaps not quick to answer, so we'll see how far we get, which was, how can you comment on more on the ways that the departments compete with each other from the dean's perspective? So there are finite resources, but what would make you see one department more positively than the others? And have you seen any good ways to incentivize the different departments to collaborate better?
So maybe I can start. Two issues that come to mind. One is if you're running within an engineering school, you typically have accreditation to worry about. And that accreditation is used as a big stick for resources. So so in other words, department heads are going to use the tools that are available to them, and if it looks like a hammer, and then we'll use it as a hammer. And so there's a balance there. It does not hurt to point out enrollment trends and just general trends at the graduate level, undergraduate level. The place where I see the greatest economy within faculty is shared infrastructure. There far too often I see that everyone wants to build something themselves, and whether it's at undergraduate teaching labs or whatever it might be, yes, there are some special things for wet labs that are very important, health and safety issues, we can discuss that, but I see actually wasted resources on labs and other facilities that are inefficiently used because everyone wants one of. I think that's something that at the faculty level you really see that may not be quite as obvious at the departmental level.
Another very obvious place of collaboration and cooperation is hiring, right? We're all always competing to get lines to hire because every department wants to grow, right? And computer science is a place where we're getting lots of hiring now, but we still have to keep in mind that other departments want to hire as well, right? And where there crossover, it's really good to leverage, right? So for example, psychology recently came to see us last year and say, hey, we're looking to maybe ask for an extra hire, but maybe you can support us because we'll let this faculty member teach in computer science 25% of her time, right? Because she is aware, she applies AI and ML in her work. And this was a point where we could say, no, we really wanted AI and ML people ourselves, right? But it doesn't help to do so. And this was a perfect point of collaboration. And so we said, great, let's do that, right? And so that's a place where cooperation, collaboration happens a lot, right? And to the degree that you can work some of these things out, it will help other departments not be as angry as CS for hiring the way we have been.
Another thing is, I would say, is just really tone, right? So how you approach the dean is really important. And if you approach the dean from the perspective of, oh, there's this problem we have, help us solve it, you know, change that narrative to, here's this opportunity we have, help us realize this opportunity. And, you know, it's just one of tone. And I think, you know, as a department chair, and your responsibility is really to be serving your faculty in the best way that you can. That tone that you take and the way that you present things to the dean will make things either easier or harder.
Yeah, that's so important. And I'll just add one short thing. You know, space is the most difficult thing in a university, and the dean spends a lot of time on making sure that your college gets space. But the thing the dean doesn't want to hear is that you need more space. And when they go to look at it, they see that, just as I think, I forgot who pointed, I think it was Eugene pointed out, that faculty are holding on to space that's not being used because they graduated some students and now those desks are empty. So, you know, some deans will take very unkindly to your coming and asking for another lab when they actually look at the lack of density in the labs that you have. So make sure that you also have a well-documented case for why you need it, as opposed to just coming and asking for something.
So
Great.
I think we're, Rachel, we're ready for a break.
Yep. So that we're coming up on a break, and if we come back at the top of the hour, everybody can have a quick break to run and do what they need. Keep in mind that we do want you to go ahead and rename yourself for the breakouts if you haven't had a chance already. I've gone ahead and put those back in the chats, so we will have a chance to do that later. But next up, we do have another session on strategic planning and leadership, but come back at the top of the hour.
Okay. So is the panel back for the next session? Mike, Ann, Nancy, and Andrew?
I'm here.
Yep. Yes.
Okay, then let's get started. And David, can you bring up the slides? And we have Mike. Mike came last. He goes first.
Okay, great. And
So,
somebody else is going to advance the slides for me. Is that how it works?
you have to say move to next slide.
Okay,
Yes.
great. All right. Well, hi everyone. I'm Mike Franklin. I'm chair of the CS department at University of Chicago. All right, so let's keep going. Some data that you're going to read on your own. So let's start talking about strategy. So next slide, please. Okay, so you know, this is a great event. I remember the one that I went to when I became a new chair, actually, not at Chicago, at Berkeley, where I was before I moved. But I actually, when I was thinking back to it, I realized there was only really one main thing that I remembered, which was this quote from Hank Levy, I believe at Washington, where he basically said that, you know, a lot of people, when you ask, hey, you know, why'd you become chair? They say, well, everyone else said no first, and I was the one left holding the bag, or there was no one else to do it. And Hank said very clearly, and I took this to heart, that if that's the reason you became chair, you should probably just quit now, because you're going to be a bad chair. And the reason for that is exactly what we're talking about in this session. So next slide, please. So, you know, if you're going to be chair, you're taking time out of your research, you're taking time out of your teaching. You know, you really want to accomplish something, and you'll hear this probably from most of the panelists, if not all of them, that, you know, if you want to be strategic, you have to have an understanding of what it is you're trying to accomplish. So you need to very early in your term, or even before you start, you know, write down your goals. And I put top 3 goals, you know, you can choose your favorite number. But, you know, when you're chair, as you've probably been discussing, you get hit with lots of little and not so little fires that you have to fight. And if you don't start off with some big ideas and an idea of what you are going to consider success, you're just never going to be able to get there, because you're going to get bogged down by all these little things. And so, you know, I really recommend that you think about, why did you decide to become chair, or why did you decide to accept to be chair? And now that you've done that, what is it that you hope to accomplish? And write that down. So that's my first thought on strategy. The second one is that you're not the only person around with goals. And if you're going to try to accomplish anything, you're going to need a lot of help. And so you need to really understand, where's your university trying to go? Especially, does computer science and growth in computer science align with what the university is trying to do? What are the needs of your faculty, right? If your idea to try to move your faculty into the, the next rung of CS departments, is that where your faculty is trying to go? Is that what they want for themselves? And, all of a sudden your students, what is it that your students are trying to do? Are they trying to go into academia, or are they trying to get jobs, and so on? And so, think about what all the people you need to interact with are trying to accomplish. And then, understand where there's alignment and where you're going to have to do some extra work. And then, that's going to help you identify who on campus and who in the department are going to be your allies and people you can depend on. So that's the second thing. It's good to know whether you're in a growth mode or if you're in sort of a keep the trains running on time consolidation mode. Now with COVID, we're all sort of tending to be in that second mode, which is unfortunately a lot less fun in many ways. But it's good to understand that if you're trying to grow, there's certain things you need to be doing strategically. If you're not able to grow or not trying to grow, that's going to change the way you do your strategy. And then finally, as department chair, you don't really have a lot of levers. You can influence hiring, and that has strategic impact on your department because you make bets on areas of growth and where the department should be heading intellectually. And then you have some control over local space once space has been given to your department, and so that gives you some amount of currency that you can use to get people to do things that you'd like them to do. And if you're in a situation where you have some funding, say from a master's program or professional education or something, then that can help too. But in general, chairs don't have a lot of money that they can hand out to get people to do things. So it's really hiring and space are your two levers. So that's my notes on strategy. Next slide, please. Just on leadership, it's a funny question for a department chair. When I first became chair, my dad, who's not an academic, said to me, "Oh, great, you're a department chair. How many faculty do you have working for you?" Does anyone know what the answer to that question is? 0. That's exactly right. The first thing you learn as chair is that no faculty and really not many staff really are working for you. And so that changes the way you think about leadership, right? You can't just tell people to do things. You have to collaborate, you have to get buy-in and so on. Nothing wrong with that, it's just the nature of the job. There's a famous saying that leadership involves finding a parade and getting in front of it. When you can do that, it makes it much, much easier to be a leader. Obviously, you don't want to just get in front of any parade, but if you can figure out things that you want to do that align with things that are either already happening or that other people also want to do, that's going to make being a leader much easier. So look for those kinds of opportunities. Another thing on leadership that follows from these things is that if you can help people come up with the right ideas that match what you think are the right ideas, they're going to work with you as opposed to work against you. And so, involving people in decision making, trying to nudge them into the right direction is just a skill that if you can develop that, it's going to make you, again, much more effective. The example I have there is on office assignment. We moved into a new building and I lost nights and nights of sleep trying to figure out, who to give which office to and how we were going to do that. And I eventually hit on this scheme of sending out a survey to the faculty where I said, please rank in order of priority the following things. Closeness to your students, closeness to other faculty in your research area, closeness to other faculty in the department, please list them. A couple other things, and then the last one was a nice view of the quad. And because not all the offices had a nice view. And sure enough, you know, most people, you know, you have to be kind of callous to say the thing I care the most about after you've looked at your students, the colleagues in your research area, the other colleagues in the department, and so on. You have to be pretty callous to say after all that, the thing you care the most about is a view of the quad. And so most people put the view of the quad as number 2. And I was actually able to, in fact, the only person who didn't was an assistant professor who told me that he knew exactly what I was doing when I put them that way. But I actually was able to say to people truthfully that I gave everybody their first or second choice. And then nobody complained. It was an amazing thing. So, you know, if you can think about some social engineering ideas like that, that help people make the right choice, that's going to make your job a lot easier. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to say about leadership is, you know, yes, you're department chair, but you're also a faculty member. And, you know, you might get teaching release. You know, you're not going to have time to do all your research, but I highly recommend that you know, do some teaching and you keep your fingers in research, not just because it's good for your brain, but also if you don't do that, you're gonna become one of those administrators and you're gonna lose touch with the problems that your faculty are facing. So, you know, a great way to keep on top of what's going on in your department and the challenges people are facing is by making sure you do at least some of that. So
thank you.
That's what I
Thank
have.
you, Michael. Yes, so can we go on to the next slide? Thank you, Michael. And this is, I guess this is just the slide so people remember where you're from, and we can just go on to the next one. And yes, go ahead, Anne.
Okay, thank you. And so, as I said earlier, I'm from UTEP. We're a HSI. We're also an R1 institution. I've been, like Susanne, I've been a department chair twice. I was also an associate VP of research, and I will start as a vice provost for faculty affairs August 1. So kind of have a wide range of experiences coming up. With respect to strategic planning, I wanted to let you know that we also are a CASI institution, the Computing Alliance of Hispanic Serving Institution. It's a national includes alliance that I direct. And so it has really provided us with a perspective on broadening participation. And we have a set of goals that I don't know if you can read there, but that are focused really on developing students who are highly competitive, really focus on developing faculty and staff, those who work with our students, and then also moving our students into graduate studies and working on policy. So when you look at the visioning document and you go further down, then you'll see a set of institutional capacity building strategic actions, and then student success capacity building strategic actions. And so as part of the alliance, then we are really aligning the things that we're doing to meet these various strategic actions. So we are over 60 institutions and partnerships that are working together. And so there is a lot of work across different institutions and across different partners. And so that is a big piece of what drives the department. But aside from that, then I think that another important aspect that you need to be looking at is curriculum. And this has been touched on already quite well, looking at, you know, the ubiquity of computer science and how is your department beginning to address, you know, the CS+X, the data science demands that are coming on, all of the increase in minors. So the curriculum really needs to be very relevant. Things are changing very quickly. What we have done have created strategic partners with companies like Microsoft and Google and Lockheed Martin and many others to begin to look at our curriculum. How do we prepare students that are going to be highly competitive in the workforce? The other thing that's really important is building research capacity. Our strategic planning in that area and through CASI has been funded by NSF to begin to look at how do we create partnerships outside of HSIs that involve Hispanic researchers, and what can we do to actually raise the level research capacity for competitive research in the SIZE Directorate. The partnerships I already touched upon. I did not go into the leadership, but I really liked what Michael said. I think it's really right on track. As I mentioned in the previous panel, really focus on building cooperative teams, and that requires you thinking about structuring in positive interdependence. How do you work as a collective? How do you really think about the success of anyone is a success, you know, your success is the success of the department. I mean, it's really about the department. And I think that that's highly important. The promotive interaction part of that is how do you acknowledge your faculty for what they're doing, the work that they're putting in with students and research and so forth and service. And then there's, you know, practicing skills, and then there's also individual accountability. So while we're working as a collective, we're also have to be accountable for the work that's assigned to us. And so I think it's really important that that's structured in. As a leader, it's important that it's very clear to faculty what the expectations are for their promotion, for their annual review. And then last, that I think is extremely, you know, important is this whole idea of reflection. So just looking at and doing this on a yearly basis, if not sooner, you know, what's working in a department, what's not working, how do we improve it, and how do you bring people together to do that? So that's how I look at leadership. I would like to add very quickly that CASI works as a collective impact model, and I also believe that that's a highly effective model for making change. Thank you.
Hi, do you hear me now? Cool, okay. So Nancy Amato back again. I'm from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I think many of the things I'm going to want to mention are really echoing what Mike Franklin said. First, I would say, as department chair, you do want to have a small number, and I would say, you know, really small, 1 to 3, maximum of 3, big ideas that you want to pursue while you're department head or chair. If you don't do that, it's not going to be any fun. You're just going to be running the shop and, you know, let someone else do it. Now it's okay, and I would say even good, if these ideas are yours to begin with. But if you don't make them be other people's ideas and everyone else in the department kind of share them and let them share ownership and credit for them, it's not going to work, right? So, you know, remember that as things that your department accomplished, you're going to get credit for too. So you should be generous in sharing both kind of ownership and credit for the accomplishments that you have. That'll make everyone feel a lot more invested in doing things. The other thing is, you know, don't rush this. You know, if you've just started, you know, you may know exactly what needs to be done. You might know exactly how to do it. And maybe in the end, you'll do it exactly the way you thought. But you need to take time to kind of build that parade up that Mike was talking about, so that everyone else kind of comes to that same conclusion too. And even better, if they think that some of these were their ideas, they're going to feel a lot better about it, rather than, you know, just that you convince them to do what you wanted to do. So you really, it's this whole leadership model in a department where the faculty basically don't have to do what you tell them, right? They can do whatever they want. That's why we all became faculty members. So you need to use your kind of soft persuasion to convince them that this is a great way to go forward. Now, okay, so now you have your ideas that you want to proceed and do. You can't do them if you don't have the resources. And there are different kinds of resources. There are people, there's the time of the people, and there is money, right? And you really can't move forward until you have collected all of them, or have, you know, basically a promise that they will be there when you need them. It's never a good idea to basically kind of commit and go put a ton of effort and ask people to put effort into something, and then with the promise that later on down the road, you know, you're going to get those hires. Well, if you had like started down this road last fall and now COVID hit, you're kind of in trouble, right? So it's important to, you know, of course, COVID, something huge like COVID is something none of us could have planned for, and things change. But, you know, you should do the best you can to secure those. When you're doing this, you should think about you're a department. You need to work with your dean and your college and also the campus as a whole. I'd say you want to make sure when you're trying to secure these resources, you should negotiate hard, but also be sure that you're honest and generous when you do this. If you don't, then you will only win that negotiation battle once, and everyone will be upset with you. If you do it right and generously and fairly, they're going to remember that. And the next time you come and you have a big idea and you want investment, they're going to be willing to talk with you. And then finally, think about this, and especially for computer science, this is true. It's not always a zero-sum game. People always say that about universities. It's just not so. There are things we can do to increase the pie for everyone, and that's going to make them want to work with us. So at University of Illinois, for example, everyone wants to do something with computer science. They're supportive of us growing our faculty. Why? Because that means we can be available to do more of the CS+X programs, which are going to help them increase their enrollments or expand their research portfolio or something like that. So if you take the time to think about it, how what you want to do is useful not just for your unit, it's going to have everyone be invested in helping you grow. So I'd say also, this is like the fun part of being the department head. You know, make sure you do it. Don't wait for kind of the right time and to get everything under control before you start doing this. You need to do this out of the gate. That's it.
Hello, Andrew Rao Chaplin from Dalhousie University in Canada. So I'll let you read that at another time and maybe move forward. The trick, of course, is following 4 or 3 excellent panelists is what to say that is different. So I'll try and highlight what's not repetitive, but I just want to start by saying I couldn't agree more with the main points that have been made. Next slide, if you would. So I think one of the challenges of both sort of strategic planning and leadership in the university is knowing your role. I came back to be dean, having spent 5 years in a corporate setting. And I have to say, it's much simpler in a corporate setting. The levers are much clearer. You know, in a university setting, your role is going to be some combination of leadership, management, and governance. And, you know, you need to figure out for your particular environment, for your skills, what is the subset of those tasks that you're going to take on yourself, and what are the tasks you're going to look to your executive team to run with. You can't do it all. Can't do it all in 60 hours. You probably can't even do it all in 80 hours a week. So, you know, figuring out how effectively you're going to spend your time is going to be really critical in terms of leadership. Next slide. I think this has come up in both of the sessions, but I'm going to stress it again, thinking about what do you need to learn in order to create an effective strategic plan for your unit. You know, number one, the data. You will not win those key arguments unless you fundamentally understand your unit. And you can be in a unit for 20 years as a professor and actually not really understand the key data. So figuring out, and you've heard this before this morning, but budgets and budget models. You know, who in research is doing what are your programs and courses? You know, what is the diversity of students? Understanding the key administrative calendar of your, unit. What are the standing processes? You know, go tap on the shoulder of the previous dean or the previous department head, you know, to understand that if they're available, they have lots of useful information. You know, understanding where your unit fits within the university, the trending concerns and values, what, you know, senior administration is concerned with, who are your potential allies. And then, of course, looking inwards, knowing your faculty, and several of the other panelists have mentioned this, understanding what are people's enthusiasms. Where can you have a shared vision with a lot of people that are on side and enthusiastic to move forward in the same direction? You're going to go a lot farther with, enthusiastic colleagues leading as opposed to trying to drag people along. I think there are often, one of the impediments to planning is this web of standing agreements, the history. So figuring out what the history is and which pieces of that are kind of non-negotiable, oh no, it's set in stone, it was written here, and which can be renegotiated. And then lastly, of course, knowing your staff, what motivates them, what do they want out of this, and how are you going to get them to be partners in change? Because essentially, strategic planning is all about change. If you're in, your plan is pretty simple if you're in a maintenance mode. Okay, this is really about what you're going to do next. Next slide. So, if strategic planning is about change, I thought it'd be interesting just to look at some really tactical things about change. You'll see, of course, have a plan. Those three things keep coming up. 3 is probably the maximum of those big things you want to do. Around them, you need to track the data. If you're not tracking the right data, you're not measuring things, you won't be knowing whether you're making progress towards them. I think it's really important with these strategic plans to finish things. Half-completed things do not give your unit the satisfaction of saying, okay, so defining the goal is something that you can actually complete and then making it to that line. Use your honeymoon period, to good effect. Whether you got a 3-year or a 5-year appointment, be clear up front about your goals. In those first years, if you have long-standing HR issues, that's the time. That's when people will, you'll have the capacity to fix some of those HR issues. This was a hint that someone from industry gave me that I found really useful. It's this idea of rackets. What's a racket? A racket is that thing in your unit that everyone accepts, shrugs their shoulders and says, hey, you can't change that. We've always had silos. Math has never been able to teach computer science students, math properly for computer science. Identifying 1 or 2 of these rackets and really going to the base of them and actually just trying to solve one can radically change the perception of what's possible in the unit. Suddenly people can get sort of, it off their shoulder that no, things aren't fixed. Change is really possible. Find your allies, hire carefully, appoint carefully, find your allies across campus. In terms of execution, really, I hate to say it at a moment like COVID, but, don't waste a good crisis. I've been fighting for digital signatures for 5 years, got nowhere. We had digital signatures in 2 days. You can think of other things that this crisis is moving the institution with. There's an opportunity to move things forward. Social engineering was mentioned, or nudges earlier, finding ways to encourage the kinds of behaviors that head all in the same direction that you're interested in. Acknowledging achievement. I would say one thing that's really surprised me is the degree to which faculty members in general are optimizers. Maybe it's because we all grew up as A students, so we're really interested in those things. If you put metrics in place and that faculty can see where they sit against them, they will often just rise and comply and reach that metric. And without much nudging from a strategic plan, for instance. And lastly, again, it's a little trite quote, perhaps. Change happens at the speed of trust, but I think it's really true. If there is trust, there's the correct degree of transparency, people will feel safe moving forward. And so anything that you can do that builds trust and builds trust around that strategic plan can be really important. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. So there have been a couple of questions, and I wanted to start with one of them, which is that we've been hearing a lot about have three big things. So I think a bunch of people have the question of what counts as one of those big things, and we're hoping for some examples.
I can tell you I had one big thing. It was, well, more than one big thing, but my big thing was basically broadening participation in computing. So it wasn't just like one activity, it was one thing I wanted to do. And then we, you know, wanted to build staff and come up with different programs that were in sense of that. I have to go downstairs. We have a tornado warning, so I'll maybe.
Okay, thank you. Be safe. All right. Someone who's not in a tornado warning, have an example of a big thing.
I had three, I guess, of different sizes. One was, to enhance the stature of the CS department within the university and nationally and internationally with some suitable metrics, hopefully something better than just ranking. The second thing, I had a real issue of, we were lucky enough to get new space and to have a successful management of the transition from our old space, which many people really loved and had some really nice features, to this new space that represented a lot of change and made people nervous. So that was the second thing, was to do that successfully. And the third thing was to launch a data science initiative. And so, it was a mixture of things that, were sort of a couple of year, 1 or 2 year type projects, and then longer term than that.
Yeah, this is Anne. One of the big things that we really worked on was building cybersecurity. And so we put a lot of effort on that. We were really quite successful. We became one of 22 academic programs as an NSA Academic Center of Excellence in Cyber Operations. The broadening participation, all of the work that we're doing, student success, recruitment, retaining, and advancement of Hispanics is really, really big. And then I would say the other thing is just around building the research capacity within the department. That was the other big goal that we had.
And I don't think your big thing needs to necessarily be unique, because if it is, I'm in trouble, because my three big things have been covered already amongst the other participants. So it's not a question of it's unique, it's a question about how that fits with your institution and your unit. And what does diversity and inclusion mean in your context, for instance, that really matters?
Great. So let me ask one question now, which I'm actually going to pull from an earlier session, but I think is going to resonate particularly right now, especially this is something that I know from all the data that we've seen that CRA has polled department chairs on. They're incredibly stressed out. As for new chairs right now, they are incredibly stressed out. So how do new chairs find the time to do strategic leadership right now in the face of COVID-19 when everything's on fire? Or is it okay to take a break and just deal with the fires?
So when I left as chair, I left, I guess, in December. And so a new chair came in. Someone said previously that, be looking at who's the next chair. And so I was, doing that. I had a number of faculty that were involved. So COVID hit February, March. And so he was able to very quickly, because we had a lot of things in place. And I think an important point is, if the department is running well in the past and in the future, or you're thinking of the future, you're thinking of the past, and you're thinking of current, you don't have to come in and do a bunch of things. Things should be in place, right? I mean, that's the whole point that you want to achieve. And if that hasn't happened in the past, that should be your goal now. So there were a lot of things already in place, but then COVID required rethinking advising, rethinking how courses, getting everyone up to speed. there was a lot of efforts that needed to be done. What we did, and we led an effort on how to build a better department in light of COVID. And so we sat down and talked about all the things that needed to happen. And it was around, becoming, be able to present quality education. How are you going to connect with the students? How do you understand students' needs with respect to technology, and do they have those needs? And how do we move on research? And so all of that we covered as a collective. The faculty worked together. We put together a document. We went through several rounds with it. And then now what the chair is doing is he's going through one by one and identifying the faculty that would lead those particular efforts. So that's how we dealt with it.
So we move on to the last session. Do we have everybody back? Do we have Nancy back?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Is the tornado gone, or there wasn't one? Or let's hope there wasn't one.
It left.
Okay. So
it moved in your direction.
Thank you. Thank you. I have about a half an hour. So we have Nancy Amato, Michael Franklin, Anne, Ayana, and Andrew. And so what we'd like you to do is start in the order we list you there, and just give me one thing you wish you'd known and how you solved it, if you solved it. If you didn't solve it, then I guess that's okay too, and it still is your problem. But I think just really think broadly, because I think some of these small things can actually be very meaningful to people that start out as heads and chairs. Nancy, you ready to go?
Honestly, this was a tough one for me.
You want to skip? You want to shall we give with Michael?
Well, I guess the one thing I would say is so I moved institutions, and the one thing that surprised me is that the learning curve wasn't very big. There were pretty much everything was very similar. There were most things that I was used to. There was some kind of equivalent here at Illinois, the way things worked, more or less. But there were a few things that surprised me. A couple things which surprised me were Illinois, I think, is not as good as Texas A&M in terms of kind of the way the institution works. For example, there seems to be no ombuds type person for faculty here. And on my first day here, I was basically, like briefed on a series of 300 crises, which they hadn't shared with anything about. I didn't know that they existed until I started. I had university council and HR telling me about these things. And some of them, they all involved, actually 2 involved faculty and 1 involved staff. But they were things where we had this dean of faculties in this ombuds office at Texas A&M, and here they have nothing like that, even though it's in some ways a lot more democratic than Texas A&M. And so I think just kind of it was a shock to have to learn about those things and not have. It was kind of weird, right? So I thought I knew how the institution worked, and I thought there would be all these pieces, and in most parts there were, but these were really important pieces they don't have here.
Okay. Thank you.
I did survive.
Yeah, we know you would. Michael?
Yeah, so the one I guess I want to start with was about communication. So one thing I learned as a chair is, despite the fact that nobody really works for you, you really are perceived as a leader, and sometimes you need to be the voice of the department for various people. And the case in particular was with COVID. We were all getting these messages from the dean and the provost and the president and everything, in these unprecedented times, yada, yada, yada. And, there was very little information, and nobody really knew what was going on. And my initial reaction was, I don't want to add to the noise that people are getting. I don't want to, send out a message that says, well, hi, I'm the chair of the CS department, and these are unprecedented times, and nobody knows what's going on. And so I actually just didn't send anything. And then at some point later, you know, we realized, you know, we wanted to see how our students were doing, our PhD students. So we sent out a survey, you know, just asking them how things were going and a few questions. And this amazing response came back from lots and lots of different people saying, we really would like to hear from the department. You know, we haven't heard anything from the department, and we're going through all these things. And that was just really eye-opening to me. And so I realized that, you know, even if you don't actually have something specific to say, if you don't have a solution to the problem, it's still important that you let people know that you're there and that you're thinking about them, and that you care. And I actually signed up for a communications course that our university offered. And, you know, they basically had this little recipe that actually I see it all over the place now. But that, you know, really in a situation like that, if you don't know what the answers are going to be yet, what you need to do is tell people, you know, first of all, we're working on it and we're thinking about it and we're concerned. Second of all, what are the principles that you're going to be using when you make a decision? So you'll see these things where it say, you know, the first thing we care about is the health and safety of all the people in the department. And you know, then we care about the quality of our education. And you see those, and I tend to just slough those off, but it's actually it's a formula where you're telling people, you know, here are our values, and you know, here's, you know, how we're going to make these difficult decisions. And so it's, you know, what are your principles? How are you going to make decisions? What are the key factors that you're going to be basing your decision on? And, you know, what's your timeline? When will you get back to them, either with an answer or with, you know, the current status? And so, you know, I tend to be kind of a skeptical person about, you know, messages from the administration. But in tough times, I think you have to realize that as chair, if you don't say anything, that's going to send a really bad message to people.
Okay, thank you. Anne, any story of what you wish you had known?
Well, I think that in the beginning, I didn't realize how important it is to listen to students and the students' voice. And so if you're looking at what's working well in the department, what needs to be improved, or just their perceptions, you have to find ways to hear what students are thinking. One of the things that we began to do recently over the last 2-3 years is starting to involve more instructional assistants, which are undergraduates. And they have, we went to TA training. And so we didn't do that in the beginning. There was kind of this assumption that TAs know. I mean, we would have training like every week, but there's this assumption that students actually know how to provide constructive feedback and how to identify students that are not turning in their work and so forth. So we really put a big focus on the fundamentals courses, the first 3 courses, and started doing weekly training, looking at stereotype threat, looking at implicit bias, looking at how to grade, how to provide feedback, how to communicate what they're hearing from students back to the faculty, back to the chair. And that has made a really big difference. And it also opened the door for some of the female students to approach me as chair to say, here's a problem that's happening, you know, between me as a female TA and male students. And so I wish I had known that earlier, that how important that is to provide students an opportunity to voice their feelings, their concerns, and their ideas on improvement. I mean, they come up with great ideas.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Ayanna.
Yeah, so I think, and I'm going to piggyback off a little bit of Nancy, is find out where the faculty handbook is and read it. It will be your friend. So just so you know, most schools, departments have folklore. And when you want to do something, a lot of times like, oh, you can't do that. Ask, well, where is it written down that I can't do this, or what is it? And usually what you'll find is that anything can be done. There's just a process to go through it. And usually it's in some policy in HR or in the faculty handbook. Don't take folklore to heart. When I first came, it was a lot of time, oh, you can't do that because we you know, this has never been done. And then I started asking, show me it in writing. And all of a sudden I found that you can do so many things because it's in the faculty handbook and it's in the HR policy. So just don't push back and just ask, where is it written? And you'll find ways of getting things done that you may not have realized before.
Yeah, +1, that's a huge one. That was true at A&M too. Oftentimes you'd ask something and they'd say that the kind of almost instant response was, it's against state law. And I would always ask them, show me the law. And it was never against the law.
Okay. Andrew, let's finish around.
I'd like to, echo Ayanna. I mean, I think of it as secret knowledge and figuring out, where it's written down, who has it, who's willing to share it with, who's really important. But, the thing that I wish I'd known was what was important. Because at first, there's just so much that's important. So what is in all this stuff you're looking at important? And so, I think the solution is really just in that first phase, go ask the last leader of that unit, ask students, ask senior staff members who have been there for a long time. And they're all willing to share what they think is important. You've got to synthesize that, but that's a great base to start from.
Okay. So it was very interesting that everybody touched on communication in verbally written and just knowing what goes on, which I think is actually an important message to send. Are you ready to, did you want to take questions or do you want to go another round? You want, do we have questions in the chat on this?
No, the only thing in the chat so far is that someone said they started a student advisory board. Okay.
So, Nancy, do you have another, what you wish you had known? No?
Nope.
No, okay. Michael, you must have another one.
I made a list. Keep learning. Well, so I have another communication one, which is kind of the opposite of what Ayanna and Nancy were saying. Well, it's the flip side of it. It's not the opposite, but and that is get things in writing. So,
yes.
When I moved to Chicago,
I did that. Yes.
Yep.
I've used it more than once.
There was an event that I went to with all the mucky mucks that I was going to be working with. The dean and the provost and a bunch of people like that. Sometimes just for a parlor game, my wife and I go through the people we could remember were there and try to figure out how many of those people are still at the university in the positions they were in. And it's a very, very small percentage. We have a new provost, I have a new dean, it goes on and on and on. Especially when you're trying to get resources for your department and somebody says, yes, we can do this. Send them an email and say, thank you for that great meeting. As we discussed, you're going to do this, that, and that. And if they know what you're doing, they'll respond saying, yes, that's what we discussed. Maybe they'll tune it up a little bit. But then you at least have it so that when the next person comes in, they may say, well, I'm not bound by that because that wasn't my agreement, but at least you have some evidence that you're not just making this up. And sort of the same thing when you make a deal with a faculty member, it's good to have them send you a message and just an email about what they think you agreed upon so that you can clear that up. And then again, you both have a record down the line if a question comes up. So write things down.
So I want to follow up on a question that we never asked, and that was about mentoring assistant professors. So I'd like if you could, if Anne, Ayanna, is there anything you could, as a what you do or what you wish you would be doing with respect to mentoring assistant professors? I think we haven't touched on that, and I do want to. There are some people who really, I think this is important, and they brought it up again. So I want to get your any best practices on that?
One of the things that I like to do is really sit down with them and have them come up with to think about where they want to be in 5 years. You know, what is it that you want to do? Faculty come in many times in the beginning and they just start going after funding without really a clear direction. And so it's really trying to understand, you know, and let me back up, and other faculty want to bring them in because they have new ideas and so forth. So it's really around how do they start structuring their, you know, what is their research plan? What should they be? What types of proposals are they going to go after? I always think about career. So I talk to them about, you know, what courses they want to teach. How are they going to integrate research and teaching? Because I think that that's really important. Is think about your research. What courses do you want? How are you going to build that? How are you going to build your research team? And so if they think about that plan, then that can provide guidance to them. And then, of course, as a chair, I think it's really important that you are working with them on a regular basis. I always offer to review proposals. If it's a career, I want them to, you know, in the fall, careers are due in the summer, to be thinking about in the fall, putting it together, then identifying internal reviewers, identifying external reviewers, so that they get that feedback, have time to refine and then submit. And it may not be in the first year, it may be in the second year, but I really, you know, challenge them to think about those things that they're going to do that would make their proposals stand out.
Okay. Does Andrew, does anyone want to contribute to that question?
I actually do.
Ayana,
so one
yes.
of the things that I do is with junior faculty is to show them that the chair is human. Because a lot of times they see full faculty, they see chairs, and it's like, oh, it looks so easy at that point. So I do think I have open sessions where I'm like, you know, you have the permission to say what's wrong. And I then follow up in writing, like, this is what I heard, and these are the things I think we can change. And it really empowers them to also speak up if they feel like they're not getting the mentorship, that, you know, there's something wrong in the school, there's some issues with students, which has actually helped the school grow as well, because I think of them as the canary in the mine. If something's wrong with them, it's actually, there's something wrong with the school. And so it's almost like a cross mentoring. I'm mentoring them, but they're also mentoring to make the school better.
Okay. Nancy?
Hi, this is my dog Wilma, who's afraid. But so we do a few things, and we did this also at A&M, is we would assign formal mentors, usually 2 actually, to each faculty member. And then they have some kind of formal responsibilities through like all the, you know, the stepping stones, like 3 review, promotion, prepare, all that, help them with proposals. And then I also have lunch once a month with all of the assistant professors as a group. And we have a topic usually that's kind of what we're going to talk about that day. But then we always end up talking about whatever else is on their mind. And I found that's been really useful for them to kind of also get to know each other. When the new assistant professors join, then there's the more senior ones who mentor them too. And it's outside of their research groups. It's across the research groups. And that actually I think was really useful. And that worked well at A&M too.
Okay, thank you.
I recommend that.
Andrew, did you want to add something on mentoring?
No, I mean, it really is important not only just to have formal mentors, but to follow up and making sure that those mentoring relationships are working, that there's actually something happening there. There's no point in just assigning 2 mentors and then letting it go. Sometimes it catches and sometimes you have to intervene again.
Yeah, okay. So we have, basically we have just a minute left in this session, and then we left 5 minutes to finish up. So I do believe doing this workshop was an experiment. We didn't know whether actually CRA was going to run this workshop at all. And so I think we hope that there will be a snowboard next year, and we hope that this will be in person because a fair amount is lost by doing a workshop like this in a virtual setting. But I do hope you have a lot of material that we also posted. I think you can you will get a participant list. Somebody asked CRA about the participant list, and so unless you excluded yourself, you will get a list that shows who was present, which certainly we encourage you to follow up with and stay in touch, and maybe form a group of people that you and chairs that you want to connect with, because being a chair is a lonely job. Being a dean is even lonelier. So it's nice to have a group of peers to talk to. So Rachel, what are other wrap-ups?
Can I give a plug to one of the Snowbird sessions? Because
sure.
There's a session that's going to be on mentoring, that's going to be talking about both mentoring students and other faculties, particularly paying attention to issues that came up because of COVID. It's kind of in response to one of the questions that just came there. I think that's on Thursday. I don't remember now.
Okay.
But it'll be a good session. Maria Gini and Ellen Zagura and Chad Jenkins are the speakers, and I'm the moderator.
Okay.
Yeah, so I note that one of the things that's happening a lot in the questions is we're getting a lot of questions about COVID-19, and it's worth noting that we are very aware that that's going on, but an awful lot of the bulk of the Snowbird content is geared towards COVID-19. So I encourage you to go to those other sessions and ask those questions there. There are sessions about mentoring of faculty. There are sessions about dealing with teaching. There are all kinds of sessions around COVID-19 because the same issues that you're struggling with are ones that everybody is struggling right now.
Yeah.
So definitely warmly recommend checking out those resources as well.
And CRA did in June 2 surveys. One went to instructors, one went to chairs. Some of you may have answered it, and we do have that data. And for the instructors, there's a talk recorded by Ron Libeskind-Hadas, and actually the white paper. For the chairs, we just finished a set of slides with a summary, and we are trying to get a white paper done by the end of next week. So this especially for you as chairs, the chair survey gives you a sense on how difficult this is for everybody. And I would assume this is sent out to if you registered because we just finished it yesterday. Yeah. So it's an incredibly stressful time for all chairs, and the 127 responses we asked them, who causes you most of the pain? It is the dean and the administration. So the pain comes from above. Yeah. So. Rachel, are there any other wrap-ups that we want to do?
No, I think that's it. Just make sure that you remember that there will be surveys at the end of the time, and to do pay attention to anything that you get about asking about snowboard or this workshop, because we do read them as we're preparing the next one. Obviously, if we had been in real world, we would have had a lot more chance for interaction because we know that that's important. But, you know, we do the best we can, but definitely feel free to give feedback on any aspects that you think in order to help the next people make it better.
Okay. Thanks to all of you for making time to be here, and thanks for the IT staff and everybody who helped us get all the setups done. Okay.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.